Hello! Today's stories come from r/Am I the Butthole? Well. Today we sort by controversial and have four stories that I didn't find particularly controversial at all. This can mean only one thing. I'm wrong and I'm about to get overruled in my own comment section. Let's find out, and don't forget to leave your judgment in the comments. Our first story is: Am I the butthole for doing the same thing to my sister in law that she does to my son? So, background: I'm a 32-year-old female and I have a brother, Dave. He's 35, and he's married to Sarah, who's 29. They don't have children yet. I have a son who just turned 4 and a 3-month-old daughter with my husband, who's 39. My husband and I live in Belgium most of the time, but we travel back to visit my family about once a month in England. At home, we speak both English and French to our children. My husband is Belgian, and right now, my son is in this very sweet phase where he'll sometimes mix up the two languages and say a couple of words in English in a French sentence or vice versa. This has never posed a problem to us, and even the staff at his nursery have reassured us that it's very common, and they tend to grow out of it once they start at school. My sister in law has decided that this is a problem. So when we're visiting my parents and she notices my son doing this, she'll correct him, but she does so really rudely, whereas my husband and I will just gently correct him. Anyway, we're visiting at the moment, and she's now decided that instead of correcting him, she's just going to start ignoring him when he does this. I sort of noticed her doing it when we arrived, and I thought it was odd, but assumed maybe she was just stressed. Her job is quite intense, but it only really became an issue yesterday. My husband was talking to my dad outside, and I was feeding my daughter in the other room, and I'd left Lewis with Sarah and Dave. When I came back downstairs, Lewis was crying, and I managed to understand that he tried to ask Sarah for a drink. He has a special cup he uses that he was holding, so it was obvious what he meant, but that she just ignored him. I asked her why, and she explained that she wasn't going to reply to him unless he said the sentence correctly, and that I shouldn't be ignoring my son's obvious speech issues. For context, it's not that she didn't know what he wanted. She told me that she understood exactly what he was asking for, but that she was deliberately refusing because he hadn't asked correctly. This really upset me, but luckily my husband came inside at that moment and pulled me away so we could calm down and settle Lewis. That night at the dinner table, Sarah asked me to pass her something, but she said it in bad English. She is English. I just meant that she asked for it in slang. Think, pass us the peas, will you? I had a bit of an epiphany, and I just decided to totally ignore her. She asked again, and I did the same thing. My brother asked why I was ignoring his wife, and I said that I'm not able to reply if she can't speak English correctly, and that it's wrong of him to ignore her obvious issues with grammar. Everyone's pretty upset with me, and I admit it was incredibly childish, but she was needlessly being a jerk face to my baby. Should I just apologize? Edit. Wow, this really blew up. Thanks for all the comments and support, and thanks for all the everyone sucks here, you're the butthole messages too. I'm not going to apologize to her because, to be quite frank, I think she deserved it. But I will have a conversation with her and my brother before we leave to try and explain that. For one thing, it's completely normal, and more importantly, that if she keeps correcting or ignoring my son, I'll be severely limiting their contact. Although I doubt if I'll ever leave him alone in a room with her again anyway. To answer a few of the most common questions, when I said everyone was mad at me, I meant my brother, his wife, and my parents. Although my parents don't agree with what Sarah's doing either, they're more trying to keep the peace. My husband is entirely on my side, and when he realized what Sarah had done to Lewis, he only saw the aftermath, he wanted to cut short the trip. Sarah and the rest of my family only speak English, which I suppose goes some way towards explaining why she doesn't understand it. I do think it's a monolingual reaction because we've never experienced anything similar in Belgium. One final thing: lots of questions about why we're in the UK so often. My husband has to be in London for his job about once a month or once every 6 weeks, so we tag along. I freelance, and a few of my clients are UK based, so it's a good opportunity for me to fit in a few meetings too. It also gives us the chance to bring Lewis and Misha over to see my parents before Lewis starts school, and we have to cut down on the visits. Not the butthole. One might argue this is childish and perhaps a little petty, but hey, The sister in law started it and is being ridiculous. I mean, her grammar issues are really a sign that her linguistic capabilities are far inferior to that of her bilingual nephew. Let's check out the comments, which might explain why this one was even close. And it has more to do with the voting categories than the story, in my opinion. Rainuna said, "Not the butthole. You completely passive aggressively defended your kid against a childish adult. Was it petty? Yes. Was it deserved? Heck yes." Finish Every 6002 said, "Yeah, this would be justified. Butthole." Troublesome Foe added, "I wish JAH was a category." Edited to add, JAH equals justified butthole. Sam Spade PI said, "Not the butthole. I think it was a good way of making your point, actually. Your son is 4. Of course, he's going to make a few grammatical and pronunciation errors. Gentle correction is the way to go, not ignoring the kid unless and until he gets the sentence right. How does he even know what's right unless the adults in his life tell him?" Solid Wrongdoer added, "Plus, it's freaking cute when little kids mix up their languages. Certainly not something to get all pissy about." Ghost of You Mitch added, "In the States, a lot of little kids who watch Peppa Pig start saying a few words with a British accent. It's funny and it's cute, and they grow out of it. People clutching their pearls over such things need to chill." Our Luna 911 said, "Not the butthole. This is genius and I love it. I speak 3 languages and grew up learning them. At age 3, I interspersed words of all the languages and got my lowest grade ever in nursery school because my nursery teacher was like Sarah. Years later, this behavior is considered normal of a child becoming fluent in multiple languages, and they do sort it out by the time they are school age. What's Sarah's excuse? Your reaction was perfection." Our second story had some interesting debate about whether this counts as tampering with food. It's titled, "Am I the butthole for tricking my husband into eating the food I cooked by making him think his mom sent it?" My husband, Mickey, loves his mom's cooking. He always praises her for the food she makes and even mentioned it in his groom speech at the wedding. I consider myself a good cook. In fact, I'm going to just say that I'm even better than his mom. But the problem is, he doesn't even want to try my cooking or give me a chance to prove it. I thought this would change after marriage, but 5 months later, nothing's changed. What does he eat if he's not eating what I'm cooking? He has requested that his mom send him a meal every day to eat for dinner after getting off work, except for the weekend where we go over to her house and he eats breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert there. Every single day, he'd come home and ask if his mom sent him a meal. I grew irritated of this, and whenever I try to offer him to taste any of the wasted food I cook, he'd lay in bed and say he's full. So I came up with an idea. I cooked him the same meal his mom sent him that day and put it aside till he got home. He asked if his mom sent a meal for dinner, and I said yes, and served him my own version of the meal, not hers. He didn't notice anything different. He ate the whole thing with no hesitation while I sat across from him asking him questions about how good the meal was. He went on and on praising it, saying how perfect, exceptional it was, and how it was just what he needed after a long day at work. I smiled and said, "You're welcome." He froze and looked at me for a minute, looked down at the plate, then back at me and said, "Wait, you made this, didn't you?" I said, "With my own hand and from scratch." His face suddenly went red and he got upset and said that this was not cool. I told him he never even gave me a chance to show him how good my cooking is, and that he's probably just used to his mom's cooking and is rejecting any other alternatives, which is unfair to me. He said that I shouldn't have lied to him and basically tricked him into eating food that he had no idea where it came from. I said he liked it and admitted that it was good, so what's the issue? He got up from his seat, threw the napkin, and said that I was unbelievable, then walked out. He got quiet the rest of the evening, then posted about it on his Facebook in a vague post about being tricked into eating someone's food like that. I felt guilty and bad, thinking maybe I really shouldn't have done this, but I was frustrated with how he kept turning down every meal I tried to cook him and then say, "No thanks, I prefer mom's food." Am I the butthole? At risk of sounding judgmental, I have to say this is quite odd. I want to say not the butthole. I mean, it's not like she's putting anything bad in the food, and I'm not sure how else she'd get him to try the food given her description of her husband's disdain for everything but his mom's cooking. There's a whole other layer exposed in the comments, where people also make the case that this shouldn't count as messing with food. Let's check them out. Schweg said, "Why would you marry someone who refuses to eat your food and makes his mother make him dinner every day?" Independent Usual added, "Also, does his mom really want to make his food for the rest of his life? Or has he made up a story to get her to do it? And also, what will he eat when mommy dies and he's still a grown adult?" Not Right Meow Thanks said, "This is really the only comment this thread needs. Like, what? I don't like to victim blame, but this kind of belongs on r/leopards ate my face. Even if he's weird as frack to have the behavior in the first place, it doesn't sound like he promised her it would change or something. So why and how did she delude herself into thinking it would? Such a strange post. Is he really that good in bed or something? Please explain, OP. We need to know. Or maybe this is actually someone complaining about their kids only eating their spouse's cooking and they're trying to prove a point or something. Leopards Ate My Face styles itself as a subreddit with examples of people who are surprised by self evident outcomes. Spuckleford said, "Usually I give a hard pass to food deception, but you are driven to extremes, not the butthole. You know, in a lot of relationships, wives would love not having to cook for their husbands, but you, ma'am, are living in a creative new version of a domestic nightmare. Anyway, polite but appreciative clap." Hart added, "Yeah, I think the general rule about food deception doesn't apply when the sole piece of deception is that his wife cooked instead of his mom. The food was the same, exactly what he expected and enjoyed. It just came from a different person who he should trust as much as who he thought it came from." Our third story ramps up the controversy in Am I the butthole for waking my husband up to drive me to pick up my car when I left my keys in my locker at work? A couple of weeks ago, I accidentally left my car keys in my uniform pants at work and left my pants in my locker. I don't wear my uniform home for multiple reasons. I just bring it home to wash. I have two. I realized when I got to the subway station where I'd parked that I'd left my keys back at work. A half-hour train ride and no guarantee I'd be able to get back in the building. It was after midnight. I called my husband to ask him to bring me the spare key. 22 times. I tried my son, but he was asleep. He's 19 and has a car, and didn't wake up when I called a second time. And I tried a friend. I didn't want to call too many people because, again, it was after midnight. I kept calling my husband, hoping eventually he'd hear his phone. I wound up taking an Uber home. I needed to go get my car because they ticket after 2 a.m. usually. So when I got home and I was pretty upset that I'd called 22 times and he hadn't answered, I continued trying to call him the whole way home in the Uber. When I got home, I went inside and up to the bedroom and woke him up. I was pissed that had this been a serious emergency, I wouldn't have been able to get through to him. He kept saying he had my number in his favorites so that if I called twice, the second time it would go through. But he had the phone on silent and then put it on top of something soft, so he didn't hear it vibrating. He complained that I was mad at him for something I did. I replied that no, I was mad at me for forgetting my keys. That was 100% on me. I was mad at him for not having his phone on and that he's unreliable in an emergency, which thankfully this wasn't a huge one. So am I the butthole for waking him up and being pissed that I couldn't reach him in what wasn't a big emergency? But what if it had been? Not the butthole for waking up her husband, but definitely the butthole for overreacting and getting angry. This could have been a simple, "Hey, is there a different setting that might be worth trying on your cell phone so I can get through in future?" Not to mention, if there was a serious emergency with a great sense of urgency, it seems far more likely to me that she'd call first responders. Anywho, let's check out the comments where there was a fairly even split of votes. Salmonberry Creek said, "You're the butthole. Your first move here should have been taking an Uber home. Calling someone 22 times in a row should be reserved for emergencies only. And calling friends after midnight over a minor inconvenience is totally inappropriate. You could have 100% solved this non-emergency situation yourself, but you decided to make it everyone else's problem." Sananthic said, "Not the butthole. This is a weird one. I didn't realize so many people would be okay with their spouse being out of reach, unless it was something you both knew about ahead of time. The recent Am I the butthole about the dude whose fiancée was MIA for 9 hours, he was quite right from all replies to flip because he couldn't get in touch. But this person shouldn't be mad because, I don't know." If I were stranded somewhere and tried to call my partner and they ignored me, I'd be upset too. I'd also point out to them that if I had been calling for an emergency, say I was hospitalized and trying to get a hold of them, they would have missed my call, and that going forward, they need to be more responsible about it. But that's an expectation for me, not you. If your spouse didn't know you expected support. In response to, if I were stranded somewhere and tried to call my partner and they ignored me, CMU Pew 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 said he was asleep. He wasn't ignoring her. Bella's book said, "You're the butthole. This wasn't an emergency, so you woke him up after midnight to yell at him for not waking up? Charming. What was so bad about waiting until morning to speak to him and ask he recheck his settings? Not sure why you preferred to stew on your way home and start an argument at an ungodly hour over a mistake you made. You forgot your keys. You could have called an Uber and gone back to your work with spare keys if you really wanted to." Our last story is an example of when a tiny update makes all the difference. It's titled, "Am I the butthole for telling my sister in law that I will call the cops for child abandonment the moment she steps out of the house?" I'm a 25-year-old male. My brother Jack is 27, and his wife Jill is a 25-year-old female. It all started when Jack and Jill got pregnant. Their lease almost ended, and my parents invited them to stay at our house. The day they came, Jack asked me why I haven't moved out of my room yet. I was confused, like what the F? And he told me that he and Jill will be at my room and I go to the guest room. I refused, but my parents got mad. We got into a fight. I lost and ended in a much smaller guest room. Then Jill had a problem with my cooking. I eat scrambled eggs with mozzarella and avocado every day for breakfast, and she couldn't stand the smell. She asked me to stop. I refused. My parents got involved. I had to stop. There were problems with other food too, and I had to stop cooking them. I was told I must be more accommodating because she's pregnant. Like that is my problem. Then Jill started to boss me around. We were alone for 8 hours while my parents and Jack worked. She obviously thought I will be her personal maid. I refused. She threw a temper tantrum, like always, and I, again, had a big fight with Jack and my parents. I was told that she had a high-risk pregnancy and was on bed rest, and I'm a butthole for not helping her. I told Jack that he knocked her up. It's his responsibility. I stood my ground, and in the end, Jill's cousin came to help her sometimes. Then Jill gave birth to my nephew. I congratulated them when they came home, and that is it. I don't like babies, so I mostly keep for myself now. But that doesn't stop Jill to ask for favors. Please watch the baby while I take a quick shower. Please watch it while I make myself some food, etc. I always refuse, and we all have new fights over and over again. It all came to a head last Friday when she asked me to watch my nephew while she goes to the pharmacy for baby formula. I refused. She got mad and we had a fight. She grabbed her purse to go anyway, and I told her that the moment she walks out that door, I will call the police for child abandonment. I was serious and she knew it. She broke down and screamed what a horrible human being I am. Then she ran to her room. She had complete mental breakdown. When Jack and my parents came home, we had the biggest fight yet. Jack accused me of hating Jill and my nephew upon other things. I told him I refused to bond because they will weaponize him against me. My parents told me enough is enough, that they can't believe they raised such a selfish human being, and that either I help or I move out. I'm thinking of the second option. Am I the butthole? Edit. I work from home and pay 50% of all household expenses, including the mortgage. Jack and Jill don't contribute anything for expenses. Not the butthole. Like I alluded to in the intro to this story, this edit is worth 1,000 words. While reading the story, it seemed like something was missing. And yup, it definitely was. OP does help out by paying for 50% of household expenses. And while I personally would be happy to help out with a baby nephew, it's because I like kids. Poor OP. Let's head to the comments where he provides a little extra info and, in my opinion, affirms my verdict of not the butthole. Andante79 says, "This sounds like a super crappy situation in general. Info. Why can't Jill take the baby with her on her errands? Why do you still live at home? And how much rent do you pay? How much rent do Jack and Jill pay?" Edit. So, based on OP's response, Jill just doesn't want to parent her child all day. They pay nothing toward the house and treat OP like crap. In your shoes, OP, I might maybe sometimes watch the kid while a parent grabs a shower. I would not, however, be free in house babysitting under any circumstances, barring a genuine emergency. The way they seem to treat you, though, I can't say I'd blame you if you just refuse outright, as long as this has been made clear to everyone, not the butthole. OP replied, I am a major contributor. Jack and Jill pay zero. Jill doesn't work. I wanted to stay home and take care of my parents when they are old. I will never have a partner and children because reasons, so taking care of my parents was the plan. The moment I move out, they will have problems paying for mortgage and all other expenses. Entitled Princess will probably have to go back to work. Cupcake Frosting said, Dude, I don't think that you're a butthole, but you are a bit dramatic. And I am too. So here's what you should do. Move out and stop paying for everything. See how your family reacts when half of the money is gone, not the butthole. The coded message said, How is OP still paying 50% when there's like 6 humans living in that house? Dilettante added, Yeah, his share of the bills should have been renegotiated when the brother moved in. If it was ever brought up, I bet they were like, oh, well, he has a kid and Jill can't work because she's pregnant, so we really can't expect them to pay. Turbulent Leaf said, Y'all are wild in these comments. It is not his responsibility to care for someone else's child or to give them respite. It is his brother's job to care for Jill and their child. Whether he lives in this home with his parents or not, the responsibility of the child falls on the infant's parents. To call him entitled because he refuses to be weaponized into being an unpaid nanny is so weird. Why couldn't Jill or her actual husband bring the baby to get formula? Not the butthole. Someone else added, He isn't even an unpaid nanny. It's worse than that. He is paying 50% and Jack and Jill aren't paying at all. That kind of means he is paying to be the nanny for both the baby and Jill since she clearly needs one. If you've enjoyed the story and would like to hear more, consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Thanks, and bye for now.